My life is incomplete unless I'm building this semi-hollow base. So what we have here is an ESB4 kit by Pitbull Guitars. It comes with all the parts. It has a maple neck, so it should be more stable than the Pitbull S3 I was building earlier. The quality is alright, or as you would expect from a budget-friendly kit. It has some imperfections with the binding and a few glue spots that you have to sand out, but I guess that's normal. The back looks like this. Here I'm testing the neck angle and alignment, because before buying this base I was watching a build video of the same kit on the Guns & Guitars channel, where with the kit that Dan received there was something wrong with the neck pocket. The neck angle was just way too steep, and in the end it was impossible to set up the base, but luckily everything seems alright with my kit. Okay, so I start by raising the grain with a damp rag. This makes the hair of the wood stand up, which you then sand off, otherwise you won't get a smooth finish later on. Here I'm mixing some black and amber wood dye. I wanted to make the back of the neck look old and worn in. I'm putting black dye on the sides and a diluted black dye on the back to make it a bit darker, to combine it with amber later on. Then, similar thing on the front, I put on some black dye to sand it back. This is to enhance the wood grain of the flame maple veneer top. Then I put another layer of amber on the back and a bit of a feathering around the edges. And then I scrape the binding with a Stanley knife to make the binding nice and clean again. Then I rub over the back with steel wool to remove any loose particles of the dye. On the front I thought I will make some racing stripes, so I'm masking it off accordingly. And I mixed the yellow and the red dye powder together to create an orange. I'm using the Keda wood dye. Then I put on a layer of Tru Oil over the orange to seal it into the wood. As the secondary color I use a light blue dye, and this is to make it a color combination like one of those parrots. Then I thought I should add some blue to the headstock, so I'm sanding a bit off and I apply the blue. Here I'm doing some touch-ups to get a crisp line between the two colors. And also my rubber gloves are falling apart. Then I was scraping the front binding this time. Yeah, I wasn't happy with how the neck turned out. It was a bit blotchy. I think it was best to leave it natural. So I then glued in the neck. While it was clamped up, I applied the first layers of Tru Oil to the back of the neck, etc. After 3 days I removed the neck clamps and I moved on to spraying sealer and Nitro Cellulose lacquer. Here I'm applying a water slide decal. One thing that wasn't ideal was that I only sprayed 3 coats of sealer and then a lot of clear, and I did the level sanding at the end. But a lot better would have been to keep spraying the sealer, level sand until there are no more low spots, and only then move on to spraying the Nitro clear coat. but I'll do so next time. I have a Les Paul coming up that I want to finish in Nitro. When applying the Tru Oil, I use the same technique as in the Music Man factory. So I thin the Tru Oil with some mineral spirits or naphtha, and I apply a thin layer. I rub it off immediately and repeat that every 8 hours until you get this nice and glossy result. Then it was time for some fret leveling. I'm taping off the fretboard, mark the top with a Sharpie, do the leveling. Here I'm doing a fall off. For the crowning, I use these small files called Little Bone, made in Japan. They're quite easy to use. And then it was time for polishing everything and assembling the rest. Now it's time for the electronics. Because it's a semi-hollow base, it has no electronics compartment that you can open. So first inserted the electronics into this cardboard in the same way as the holes of the actual base, and I started soldering most of it together. Then I attach the wires of the pickups and test if everything is working by plugging it into an amp. Alright, so getting the electronics in there was actually the most difficult part of the whole build. Especially the hole for the output jack is so far away from the sound hole that there's no way you can reach it with your fingers. So I used a thread through the hole and then tried to pull in the parts with the thread. But for the output jack it took a while to get it right. For the other parts you need to get your fingers in there all the way and reach for some parts in the very back. And then it was time to assemble the rest. And here is the finished bass. I'm happy with how it sounds and how it plays. It's not a high-tech bass, obviously, but for the semi-hollow, I wanted something with a lo-fi vibe anyways. Also, it's nice for practicing without an amp, as it's slightly louder than a solid body. I had lots of fun building it. There weren't really any big issues. Alright, so time for demo now, and thanks for watching.